You feel the Sahara before you see it, the dry heat pressing against your skin like an impatient hand, the fine grit of sand already finding its way into your sandals. The wind doesn't just blow here, it whispers, carrying voices from a time when empires clashed and one woman stood between Rome and total domination of Africa. This isn't just a desert, it's an archive, and the story it's about to tell you? Rome wanted it burned. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment. Where are you right now and what's the time? There's something eerie about imagining us all scattered across the globe, listening to a tale Rome hoped you'd never hear. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is roughly 24 BCE, and if you squint against the glare, you can almost see them, the Roman legions, sweating in their heavy armor, trudging south into Kushite territory. They're not here for conquest. Not yet. They're here for submission. Emperor Augustus, fresh off his victory over Cleopatra, assumes this will be a quick negotiation, a show of force, a few demands scribbled on parchment, a token tribute, and boom, another kingdom falls in line. But the desert has other plans, because waiting for them, seated on a throne of black basalt in the heart of Meroe, is Amanirenas, warrior queen, diplomat, and the living embodiment of try me. Rome doesn't know it yet, but they've just walked into the trap of their lives. You can almost hear the Kushite scouts laughing as they melt into the dunes, watching the Romans stumble forward. The legions are used to orderly roads, fortified cities, predictable enemies. But here, the sand shifts, the horizon lies, and the queen. She knows this land like the scars on her knuckles. By the time the first Roman envoy reaches her court, his arrogance is already cracking under the heat. He looks at her, a woman, a black woman, ruling a kingdom Rome can't even map properly, and dismisses her as some exotic oddity, a temporary obstacle. He demands tribute. He mentions Rome's generosity in not crushing them outright. Big mistake. Amanirenas doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. When she finally speaks, it's not in the tone of a supplicant, but a sovereign. And her message is simple: leave or learn. The envoy returns to his camp, baffled. Rome doesn't get refused. But as he complains to his commanders, the queen is already moving. Her generals are gathering. Her archers are stringing their bows. And somewhere in the darkness, her war elephants, towering, armored, trained to crush men like beetles, are being prepared. You can feel it, can't you? That electric moment before history tips? The Romans still think they're invincible. They're about to find out what happens when a queen fights back. The scent of incense and molten gold hits you before Meroe skyline even comes into view. Thick, opulent, alive. This isn't some backwater kingdom begging for Rome's scraps. Kush drips wealth like sweat under the midday sun, and as you step closer, the city reveals itself in layers. Towering pyramids sharp as knives, temples painted in ochre and lapis lazuli, market stalls overflowing with ivory and ebony. Rome thought they were marching toward another easy conquest. Instead, they're staring at a civilization that's been refining iron while their ancestors were still wrestling wolves for territory. You weave through the streets, brushing past merchants haggling over Nubian gold and priests murmuring prayers to a Piedmont, the lion-headed god of war. The air thrums with a rhythm Rome will never understand: drums, hammers on anvils, the low groan of irrigation wheels feeding water into lush gardens. This is a city that works, not because some emperor cracked a whip, but because every brick, every canal, every grain of wheat is a middle finger to the desert's hunger. And at the center of it all, her. Amanirenas holds court not in some shadowed throne room, but under the open sky, where the sun gilds the gold bands around her arms. She doesn't sit still. She leans, restless as a leopard, one eye always on the horizon where the Roman dust cloud lingers. Her advisors speak in low tones about troop movements, supply lines, the arrogance of this new envoy demanding their submission. You catch the moment her patience snaps. A Roman scroll, heavy with wax seals and pompous Latin, is thrust into her hands. It's the usual imperial nonsense. Bow, pay tribute, accept our protection. The envoy even smirks as she unrolls it, expecting her to falter at the sight of Rome's eagle insignia. Bad move. Amanirenas doesn't bother reading past the first line. With a flick of her wrist, she tosses the scroll into the brazier at her feet. The parchment curls like a dying insect, the wax seals popping like tiny screams. The envoy's face goes slack. No one burns Rome's words. But the queen isn't done. She rises, and the entire courtyard stills. When she speaks, her voice doesn't rise to a shout. It lowers. The way a lion's growl is more terrifying than its roar. Tell your emperor this, she says. Kush bows to no one, not even the gods. The silence that follows isn't fear. It's anticipation, because as the envoy stumbles back to his camp, already drafting excuses for his failure, Amanirenas is issuing her own orders. Scouts slip into the night. Smiths stoke their forges, hammering out spearheads by the hundreds. And in the royal stables, the elephants, those monstrous, beautiful creatures, stamp their feet, as if they already smell blood on the wind. Rome wanted a negotiation. They're about to get a war. The drums start at dusk. You feel them before you hear them. A deep, rhythmic pulse vibrating up through the soles of your feet, rattling your bones like a warning. Across Meroe, torches flare to life one by one, painting the sandstone walls in flickering gold. The city holds its breath. Tonight isn't just another night. Tonight, the Candace is crowned. And Rome isn't invited. You press through the crowd, shoulders brushing against merchants, farmers, and bare-chested warriors with ritual scars curling down their arms. The air smells of myrrh and sweat and something electric, the sharp tang of history being made. At the center of the temple courtyard, Amanirenas kneels on a leopard pelt, her head bowed as the high priest anoints her brow with sacred oil. This isn't some delicate coronation with polite applause. When the priest raises the golden circlet, a coiled serpent eating its own tail, the crowd erupts. Not in cheers, in roars. Drums pound faster. Spears slam against shields in thunderous unison. Somewhere, a woman begins the ululating cry that will echo through Kush for generations. And Amanirenas? She rises, not like a flower unfolding, like a blade being drawn. The circlet gleams against her dark skin as she turns to face her people. No speeches, no hello promises, just a single sentence that slices through the noise. They will remember. It's not a hope, it's a threat. Across the city, in a stuffy guest chamber, the Roman envoy jerks awake at the noise. He stumbles to the window, expecting some barbaric riot. Instead, he sees discipline. Torchlit processions moving in perfect lines. Warriors chanting in time with the drums. A queen who commands absolute loyalty without a single crucifix in sight. His scroll case slips from numb fingers, because Augustus had assured him this was a fractured land, ripe for division. But as the crowning fires blaze into the sky, the envoy realizes the horrible truth. Rome isn't dealing with a petty tribe. They're facing a nation, and its queen just declared war without saying the word. Dawn finds Amanirenas already armored, testing the weight of a new spear. Her generals murmur about Roman numbers, about supply lines. She silences them with a glance. Let them bring their armies, she says, running a thumb along the spear's edge. The desert knows how to bury dead things. Somewhere beyond the Nile, the first Roman trumpets sound. Too late, they're realizing this isn't an invasion. It's a reckoning. The Roman envoy's sandals crunch nervously on the gravel as he's escorted back into the throne room. This time, there's no smirk twisting his lips, just sweat trickling down his temples, despite the morning chill. He clutches a fresh scroll, this one bearing Augustus' personal seal. The wax gleams like a drop of blood in the dawn light. Amanirenas doesn't rise to greet him. She lounges on her throne, one hand absently stroking the leopard pelt beneath her, the other gripping a golden goblet of palm wine. You notice the envoy's eyes flicker to the brazier still smoldering in the corner, the one that devoured Rome's last message. Speak. Her voice cuts through the humid air like a blade through silk. The envoy clears his throat. Most noble Candace, the divine Augustus proposes. Proposes? She arches one eyebrow. Or demands. A muscle twitches in the envoy's jaw. He unfurls the scroll with slightly trembling hands. Rome offers peace, he begins, voice straining to maintain its practiced diplomacy, in exchange for annual tribute of gold, ivory, and, his eyes dart up, hostages from your royal family. The silence that follows is so thick you could drown in it. Somewhere in the courtyard, a dove coos. The sound seems absurdly loud. Amanirenas sets down her goblet with deliberate slowness. The clink of gold on stone makes the envoy flinch. When she finally speaks, her words are soft, almost conversational, the way a lion might purr before breaking a gazelle's neck. Tell me, she murmurs, does your emperor truly believe I would hand him my children after he murdered Cleopatra's? The envoy pales. He wasn't expecting her to know about Caesarea. Ptolemy 15, Cleopatra's son, executed on Augustus' orders despite being barely 17. A child. Amanirenas rises now, her beaded skirt whispering against the floor. The envoy instinctively steps back, bumping into one of her royal guards, a mountain of a woman with a scar running from eyebrow to chin. You will take a message back to your emperor, the queen says, plucking the scroll from the envoy's limp fingers. But not this one. She tears the parchment down the middle with one sharp motion. The sound echoes like a slap. Kush does not pay tribute, she continues, dropping the halves into the brazier. They blacken instantly. Kush does not surrender its children. And Kush, she leans in close enough for the envoy to smell the frankincense in her hair, does not kneel. As the terrified Roman is escorted out, you catch the glint in Amanirenas' eyes. It's not just anger. It's anticipation. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, war elephants trumpet. The desert holds its breath at dawn. You stand with the Kushite scouts atop a sandstone ridge, watching the first Roman column emerge from the shimmering heat haze, a slow, silvered caterpillar inching toward disaster. Their armor glints painfully bright in the rising sun. They march in perfect formation, shields locked, oblivious to the shadows shifting in the wadis below. Amanirenas crouches beside you, her fingers tracing patterns in the dust. Not random marks, tactics. She glances at the scout captain, a wiry man with eyes permanently narrowed against the sun. No words pass between them. None are needed. The captain signals. Somewhere below, child's laughter rings out, impossibly clear in the dry air. The Romans freeze. It's all the distraction the Kushites need. A war horn shatters the silence, its bellow rolling across the dunes like thunder. Then the ground itself seems to move as 50 armored elephants burst from hidden gullies, their tusks fitted with cruel iron spikes, their howdahs packed with archers already knocking arrows. The Roman line buckles. A centurion barks orders, but his voice cracks mid-shout as the first elephant plows into the shield wall. With splinters, men scream. The air fills with the coppery stench of blood and the acidic tang of panicked sweat. You see it happen in horrifying slow motion. A legionary turns to run, just as a Kushite arrow punches through his calf, pinning him to the sand like a butterfly to a board. A cavalry horse rears, throwing its rider directly into the path of a swinging elephant tusk. A Roman standard-bearer makes the mistake of raising his eagle, only for a spear to send it tumbling into the dust, where a Kushite warrior stamps it beneath her bare foot. Amanirenas watches it all with the calm of a woman inspecting grain yields. When a young officer rushes up, breathless with victory, she silences him with a raised hand. "This isn't the battle," she murmurs. "This is the message." And what a message it is, as the surviving Romans stagger northward, leaving a trail of bloodied sand behind them. The Kushites don't cheer. They sing a low, rhythmic chant that follows the broken legion for miles. The words, "Tell them who did this. The desert sun beats down like a hammer on an anvil as the shattered remnants of the Roman cohort stagger toward their fortified camp. Their once proud formations have dissolved into a limping, bleeding snake of men clutching makeshift bandages. The sand, thirsty as ever, drinks their blood eagerly. You walk unseen among them, catching the whispers. They came from the ground itself. The elephants, gods, the elephants. That woman isn't human. She's some desert demon. Their commander, a grizzled veteran who earned his scars fighting Gauls and Iberians, clutches a broken sword in his shaking hand. This wasn't war as Rome understood it. No glorious charges, no orderly siege lines. Just the land itself turning against them, the very dunes conspiring with their enemy. Back in Meroe, Amanirenas receives the scouts' reports without ceremony. The Roman camp is in chaos, their water lines cut, their wounded screaming for surgeons they don't have. She listens, nods once, then turns to the war table where a map of the Nile Valley is spread beneath weights of polished obsidian. They'll send reinforcements from Syene, murmurs her chief general, tracing the river's curve. Double the legions, triple the cavalry. Amanirenas smiles, the slow, dangerous smile of a leopard spotting a gazelle's limp. Let them. She reaches across the table, her gold armbands glinting in the lamplight, and moves 3 small ebony elephants onto a narrow stretch of riverbank. The Nile will do half our work for us. The generals lean in, eyes widening as they understand. The Romans, for all their famed discipline, still fight like Europeans, expecting clear lines of battle, open fields, orderly engagements. But the Nile in flood season is a capricious beast, its currents unpredictable, its banks treacherously soft. And Amanirenas? She knows every bend, every hidden quicksand pit, every stretch where crocodiles nest thickest. That night, as torches flicker along Meroe's walls, the queen stands alone on her palace balcony. The desert wind carries the distant cries of Roman wounded, and the nearer sounds of her smiths working through the night, hammering arrowheads, fitting new blades to spears, preparing for the storm to come. She breathes in the scent of hot metal and impending rain. Rome thinks this is a war of empire against kingdom. Amanirenas knows better. This is the land itself rejecting an invader, and she is merely its instrument. The first drops of rain hit like sling stones, fat and heavy, kicking up little puffs of dust before the desert greedily swallows them. You stand at the edge of the royal stables as Amanirenas inspects her war elephants, great heaving mountains of muscle and rage, their armored hides glistening with oil to repel arrows. One particularly massive bull elephant rumbles deep in its chest as she approaches, lifting its trunk to gently touch the golden circlet on her brow. "Still eager, old friend?" she murmurs, pressing her forehead to the beast's leathery skin. The elephant's answering trumpet shakes water from the palm fronds overhead. A young messenger arrives, panting. The Romans have crossed the Second Cataract. 3 full legions this time, with auxiliary cavalry from Mauritania. Their commander, Tronius, a favorite of Augustus, has sworn to burn Meroe to the ground before the next full moon. The queen doesn't look up from buckling an iron spike onto her elephant's tusk. Let him try. As night falls, the storm breaks in earnest. Lightning forks across the sky, illuminating the silent columns of Kushite warriors slipping through the downpour. They move like shadows between the raindrops, their bodies smeared with ash to dull any glint of metal. You move with them, feeling the Nile's rising waters lick at your ankles as you ford what was a dry wadi just hours before. Somewhere in the darkness, a Roman sentry coughs. The Kushite archer beside you smiles, teeth white against his blackened face. He knocks an arrow fletched with owl feathers, designed to fly silent as a falling leaf. Then the world explodes, not with the blare of trumpets or clash of steel, but with a sound far more primal. The earth itself giving way as Amanirenas' sappers collapse the carefully weakened riverbank. The Nile surges into the Roman camp like a living thing, swallowing tents, quenching watchfires, sweeping screaming men into its churning belly. In the chaos, No one sees the war elephants coming until it's too late. They emerge from the storm like ghosts, their howdahs filled with archers, their great feet churning the flooded ground into a killing mire. The few Romans who managed to form ranks soon wish they hadn't. The elephants carry not just archers, but great clay pots of burning pitch that shatter among the legionaries, turning the floodwaters to fire. Amanirenas rides at the center of the maelstrom, her leopard skin cloak streaming behind her like a battle standard. She doesn't shout orders. She doesn't need to. Every Kushite warrior knows their role, moving with the precision of a well-rehearsed dance. By dawn, the Nile runs red for miles. Petronius escapes, barely, with less than a third of his men. The rest lie bloating in the sun, their ornate armor now little more than fishing weights in the great river's embrace. As the Kushites gather their dead, a singular rumor spreads through the ranks. When the floodwaters first surged, several men swore they saw the crocodiles deliberately avoiding Kushite bodies. Whether true or not, by midday the story is already being carved into temple walls. The silence in the Roman camp is deafening. You move unseen between the tents where the survivors of Petronius' shattered legions huddle, their usual bravado replaced by hollow-eyed stares. The air reeks of wet wool, infected wounds, and something new fear. Not the clean, battle-born fear of facing a worthy opponent, but the creeping dread of men who've realized they're fighting something they don't understand. A centurion with his arm in a sling mutters to his comrades. They say she walks through arrows like rain, that the crocodiles won't touch her warriors, that the very sand. His voice trails off as the tent flap opens. Petronius stands there, his usually immaculate uniform streaked with mud and what might be blood. The men stiffen, expecting a reprimand for their superstitions. Instead, the Roman commander just stares at the map unfurled on the campaign table, the one where Meroe is marked with a simple, as if it were any other provincial backwater. "We underestimated her," he says at last, to no one in particular. Back in Meroe, there's no celebration, no drunken victory feasts. Amanirenas sits in the war chamber, her advisors unusually quiet around her. The mood isn't triumphant, focused. "They'll come again," says the chief smith, his massive arms crossed over his chest. "With more men, better prepared." Amanirenas traces a finger along the map's edge. "Let them exhaust themselves." She looks up, eyes gleaming in the lamplight. "We fight as the scorpion fights, not meeting the boot head-on, but stinging when it least expects." A plan takes shape in the hushed room. Scouts will shadow Roman movements, reporting every troop rotation. Farmers will hide their grain in underground silos, leaving nothing for foraging parties. And the queen herself will lead a series of lightning raids, not to conquer, but to unsettle. That night, you stand watch with the border sentries. The desert wind carries strange sounds. The distant clank of Roman armor, yes, but also something else. The rhythmic thump of drums from Kushite hilltop to hilltop, relaying messages no Roman cipher-breaker could decode. One young warrior, barely old enough to grow a beard, squints at the horizon. "Do you think they'll ever stop coming?" The veteran beside him spits into the dust. "Does the Nile ever stop flowing?" A pause, then quieter. "But we're the crocodiles in that river." The drums beat on. The moon hangs like a curved blade over the desert as you creep through the Roman supply camp. The sentries here are lax, fatigued from constant alerts, their vigilance eroded by weeks of chasing shadows. They don't notice the Kushite scouts slipping between tents, their bare feet silent on the sand. They don't see the glint of knives in the darkness, but they do hear the elephants. Amanirenas strikes at the deepest hour of night, when even the desert creatures hold their breath. Her war beasts emerge from the darkness like nightmares given flesh, their tusks fitted with sickle-shaped blades that slice through tent ropes with a single swipe. Canvas collapses onto sleeping soldiers, trapping them in suffocating folds as Kushite warriors move through the chaos with methodical precision. This isn't a battle, it's sabotage. Grain sacks are slit open, their contents scattered to the wind. Water skins are punctured, precious liquids soaking into the thirsty earth. Horses are set loose, their panicked whinnies spreading confusion. And the Roman siege engines, those towering monuments to imperial might, are reduced to kindling by teams of Kushite sappers wielding hammers and fire. You watch as a young legionary stumbles from his tent, blinking sleep from his eyes, just in time to see Amanirenas herself pass by on her armored elephant. For a heartbeat, their eyes meet, the bewildered Roman boy and the queen who has become his army's personal specter. Then she's gone, melting back into the night as suddenly as she appeared. By dawn, the camp is in shambles. The Romans tally their losses, no mass casualties, but their siege capability is crippled, their supplies ruined, their morale crumbling like bad mortar. Petronius stares at the smoldering remains of his prized ballistae. "This isn't warfare," he mutters to his second-in-command. "This is humiliation." Back in Meroe, Amanirenas peels off her bloodied bracers as her generals deliver reports. The raids were successful, but she knows this is only a temporary setback. Rome's resources are endless, its pride even more so. "They'll send more," says her chief advisor. "More men, more machines." The queen dips her hands into a basin of rosewater, watching the blood swirl away. "Let them," she says softly. "Every legion they send here is one not guarding their borders elsewhere." A slow smile spreads across her face, the smile of a woman playing a game only she fully understands. Augustus wants Kush. Then let him explain to the Senate why Gaul is rebelling again, why Parthia is testing his eastern borders, why his precious empire stretches too thin. She tosses the bloody water onto the palace tiles, where it evaporates almost instantly in the morning heat. "We won't just defeat Rome," she murmurs. "We'll bleed them." The Nile Delta shimmers under a merciless sun as Roman reinforcements arrive. Not just legions this time, but engineers, architects, and a small army of slaves dragging siege towers, disassembled like the bones of some great beast. Petronius has learned his lesson. He won't be caught unprepared again. You walk among the newly erected fortifications, watching legionaries sweat as they raise wooden palisades and dig trenches lined with sharpened stakes. Their centurions bark orders with a nervous edge. They've heard the stories. The whispers of a queen who walks through fire, of elephants that appear like desert mirages only to vanish again, leaving only corpses in their wake. But Amanirenas isn't where they expect her to be. While Rome builds its fortress at the Delta, she's 200 miles south, standing knee-deep in the sacred waters of Lake Nasser. The priests of Ammonius chant as she raises a golden chalice, letting the liquid catch the first light of dawn. "The river remembers," intones the high priest, his voice echoing across the still water. "The river remembers," the crowd responds. What follows isn't strategy or logistics, it's theater of the highest order. Amanirenas knows wars aren't won by steel alone, but by the stories men tell around campfires. So she gives them a story to remember. As the sun climbs, a procession of barges appears, each carrying statues of Kushite gods draped in lion pelts. Archers line the banks, firing flaming arrows across the water in perfect unison. The priests unveil a new standard, a golden cobra wrapped around an iron spear, its jaws wide as if to swallow Rome whole. But the true masterstroke comes at dusk. As torches flicker to life along the shore, 100 Kushite warriors emerge from the lake itself, their bodies painted with phosphorescent algae that glows an eerie blue in the twilight. They move in perfect sync, their spears tracing arcs of ghostly light through the gathering dark. To the assembled nobles and foreign emissaries, the message is clear. Kush doesn't just fight with weapons, it fights with magic. A Roman spy, poorly disguised as a Syrian merchant, drops his wine cup. The clay shatters like the confidence of the empire he represents. By the time reports of this miracle reach Petronius' camp, the story has grown wilder. Some claim the queen summoned spirits from the Nile itself, others that she made the stars fall from the sky to dance at her command. The truth matters less than the fear taking root in Roman hearts. As Amanirenas watches the last embers of the ceremonial fires die, she murmurs words only you and the night wind hear. Let them bring their siege towers. We bring gods. The desert wind howls through the Roman camp like a scorned spirit, tearing at tent flaps and sending sentries huddling deeper into their cloaks. Petronius paces before his war table, fingers tracing the same stretch of riverbank for the 100th time. His officers watch in silence. They've learned not to interrupt the general's brooding. Then the messenger arrives. The man is half dead, lips cracked from days without water, his tunic stiff with dried sweat. He collapses at Petronius' feet, pressing a sealed scroll into the general's hand before his eyes roll back. The wax seal bears Augustus' personal insignia. Petronius breaks it with trembling fingers. The parchment unfurls, revealing not the reinforcements he expected, but a single line of stark Latin. Withdraw. The empire bleeds elsewhere. For a long moment, no one breathes. Then a strangled laugh escapes Petronius' throat. After all this, after the men we've lost, he wants us to. The tent flap whips open. A centurion, face ashen, doesn't bother with formalities. Sir, the Kushites. There, you're already moving, pushing past stunned legionaries to see what has sent terror through the camp. On the horizon, silhouetted against the rising sun, a single war elephant stands motionless. No army behind it, no fanfare, just Amanirenas atop her mount, her spear planted upright in the howdah like a standard, waiting. Petronius stumbles out, squinting at the distant figure. Is this some trick? But the veterans know. The old centurions who survived Carrhae and Teutoburg Forest recognize the gesture for what it is. A victor come to witness surrender. The Roman lines dissolve into chaos. Some men weep with relief. Others, pride still burning in their guts, clamor for one final charge. Petronius silences them with a slash of his hand. We are ordered home. He grinds out. The words taste like poison. As the Romans begin striking camp, their movements sluggish with shame. You notice the small details, the way they keep glancing over their shoulders, as if expecting the dunes themselves to attack. The hushed curses when the wind carries the faintest echo of Kushite drums. The hurried, almost frantic pace at which they dismantle their siege engines, not for transport, but to burn. No trophies for the queen. By midday, the first columns begin their retreat north. They leave behind not just broken equipment, but something far more precious, the unshakable certainty of Roman invincibility. And on the ridge, Amanirenas finally moves. She raises her spear, not in threat, but salute, then turns her elephant back toward Meroe. Her work is done. The news travels faster than any messenger could ride. You watch from the crowded streets of Alexandria as whispers slither through the marketplace like serpents. The southern legions are retreating. The Kushites have broken them. Augustus himself ordered the withdrawal. Merchants pause mid-haggle. Off-duty legionaries stiffen at their wine cups. The air hums with something the Mediterranean world hasn't tasted in generations. Defeat. In the palace quarter, a different kind of chaos unfolds. Roman officials burn documents with frantic haste. Egyptian scribes, long suppressed under imperial rule, exchange glances heavy with meaning. Somewhere in the city, a daring poet begins composing verses about the lioness who clawed the eagle's breast. And for once, the censors don't stop him. But the true spectacle unfolds at the docks. You jostle through the crowd just in time to see the first ships arrive from the south. Not proud warships with sails billowing, but battered transports crammed with hollow-eyed survivors. They bring no spoils of war, no chained captives to parade through the streets. Only stories. Stories of a queen who walked untouched through hails of arrows, of elephants that materialized from sandstorms, of a land that seemed to fight alongside its people, the very rivers rising up against invaders. The crowd drinks these tales like wine, fermenting them into something wilder with each retelling. By sundown, some swear they've seen Amanirenas' shadow flickering in the lighthouse's great flame. Meanwhile, In a private chamber heavy with the scent of burning incense, Augustus stares at a map of Africa. His fingers trace the Nile's winding path, pausing at the unmarked territory below Egypt. "We will not speak of this again," he tells his advisors. But history, like the desert wind, cannot be commanded to stay silent. As you slip back into the night, you catch the unmistakable sound of Nubian merchants laughing in a shadow tavern. Their toast carries through the open window. To the Candace, may her shadow never grow smaller. The wine cups clink like distant war drums. The pyramids of Meroe stand sentinel under a sky streaked with sunset, their steep angles cutting shadows across the victory feast below. You move through the torchlit crowds where warriors, still streaked with battle paint, pass jars of palm wine and trade increasingly outrageous accounts of the campaign. I saw her catch a Roman javelin midair and throw it back twice as hard. That's nothing. When the Nile flooded, the waters parted around our archers like they were Moses himself. Amanirenas sits apart on a raised platform, her posture relaxed but her eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting Roman sails to appear even now. A young girl, perhaps 9 or 10, sits at her feet, fingers tracing the gold bands around the queen's wrist. "Mother," the child whispers, "will they really never come back?" The queen's hand pauses mid-motion, her wine cup catching the firelight. "Oh, they'll come back," she murmurs. "Empires always do. But next time." She tilts her daughter's chin up toward the pyramids. "They'll remember who built these first." The feast rolls on, but you notice the queen's quiet departure, not to her chambers, but to the temple complex where the priests of Ammonius keep their most sacred texts. The high priest meets her with a bow, then leads her to a freshly carved stele. Even in flickering torchlight, the hieroglyphs gleam. Amanirenas, beloved of Ammonius, protector of Kush, who broke the Romans like reeds upon the Nile. She runs her fingers over the inscription, then does something unexpected. She reaches for the chisel herself. With careful strokes, she adds one final line. "Let no king who comes after forget." The priest makes a soft sound of protest. "Divine One, no ruler would dare." "Not now," she interrupts. "But in 100 years? 500. Her knuckles whiten around the chisel. "Rome writes its victories in marble and its defeats in dust. We will not make that mistake." As dawn stains the eastern sky, you watch her walk back to the palace alone, past the drunken revelers and the exhausted warriors sleeping where they fell. Her shadow stretches long behind her, not just a queen returning from war, but a woman already wrestling with how empires remember, and how often they choose to forget. Years fall like leaves from a sycamore tree. You walk the now peaceful streets of Meroe, where children chase each other past newly built granaries, and the scars of war have faded beneath layers of fresh paint. The Roman threat seems almost mythical here, a story told to wide-eyed youngsters who can't imagine foreign soldiers defiling their homeland. But Amanirenas remembers. You find her in the royal archives, where shafts of sunlight pierce the dusty air like golden spears. Her hair shows threads of silver now, her hands slightly stiffer as she unrolls scroll after scroll, checking each record of the war against her own memories. "Write it all," she tells the scribes hovering nearby. "Not just our victories, the mistakes too, the villages we couldn't save, the tactics that failed." A young scribe hesitates, but Divine One won't that. "Make us seem weak." She laughs, a sound like dry papyrus crumpling. "The strongest walls have cracks. Let future kings study them." Her son, now a gangly teenager, bursts in with news from the northern frontier. Roman traders have returned, this time with gifts instead of swords. They speak of new emperors, of borders shifting like sand. Amanirenas listens, then dismisses him with a gentle pat to his cheek. "They'll test us again," she murmurs to you, "though you haven't spoken. Not tomorrow, perhaps not in my lifetime, but empires have long memories and longer hungers." She rises, joints protesting. and moves to the balcony where the whole of Meroe spreads below. The bustling markets, the newly repaired temples, the children playing where war elephants once stamped. So we build, she says softly. Not just monuments, but knowledge. Not just armies, but wisdom. The wind carries the scent of baking bread and the distant chime of copper workers at their forges. Somewhere below, her daughter, now grown, drills a squadron of new recruits with the same leopard skin cloak flaring behind her. Amanirenas smiles. The Romans may come again, but Kush will be waiting. The desert night is impossibly still when the end comes. You stand vigil in the shadowed chamber where Amanirenas lies, surrounded by her children, her generals, the priests murmuring prayers older than Rome itself. The air hangs heavy with myrrh and something else, not grief yet, but the quiet tension of a bowstring about to be released. She refuses the poppy draft that would ease her passing. I faced Rome clear-eyed, she rasps. I'll face the gods the same way. Her daughter presses a kiss to her weathered hand, the same hand that once tore a Roman scroll in half before the emperor's envoy. The gesture makes the old queen smile. The steel, she whispers urgently. You'll keep adding to it. Every battle, every lesson. Yes, mother. Good. A rattling breath. Now listen, really listen. The Romans will send historians before they send armies. They'll offer gold for stories about me. Let them take some. Her son stiffens, but the lies they'll spread. Let them. Her eyes gleam in the lamplight. A story hidden is easily erased. A story told, even by enemies, lives forever. The priests begin the death chant, their voices rising and falling like the Nile's own tides. Amanirenas' gaze grows distant, fixed on some point beyond the chamber walls. Do you hear that? She murmurs. Her children hear only the priests. But you catch it. The faintest echo of war drums carried on the night wind. Or perhaps just the blood rushing in your own ears. Her last breath leaves her smiling. Outside, the city sleeps unaware. The guards still walk their posts. The bakers still knead dough for morning bread. The river still slides endlessly toward the sea. But something has shifted. The wind, when it comes again, carries whispers in a dozen languages, of a queen who stared down an empire, of a victory that refused to fade, of a story that even the victors of the world couldn't rewrite. And if you listen very closely, beneath the sighing palms and the distant hyena's cry, you might just hear the faintest echo of a woman's laughter, rich, unrepentant, and utterly, gloriously unforgotten. The night settles over Meroe like a velvet shroud, softening the edges of pyramids and palaces alike. The story you've walked through, of golden armbands glinting in firelight, of war elephants shaking the earth, of a queen who stared into the maw of an empire and didn't blink, begins to dissolve now, grain by grain, into memory. But before you go, let's linger a moment longer in this liminal space between history and dream, where the desert still whispers its secrets to those who listen. Amanirenas' tale isn't just about battles won or borders held. It's about the fragile alchemy of memory, how easily the world's conquerors erase what doesn't serve them, and how stubbornly truth persists in the cracks. Rome built its histories in marble, but Kush wrote hers in the bend of the Nile, in the weight of a chisel carving warnings for the future, in the laughter of children who'd never know war but would inherit its lessons. There's a quiet rebellion in that, a reminder that the most powerful stories aren't always the loudest, just the ones told often enough to outlast silence. Think of it. While Augustus statues stood stiff and smug in forums across the Mediterranean, a woman he never truly defeated was ensuring her people would remember the real story, not through brute force, but through something far more subversive, unbroken tradition. The same hands that wielded spears also cradled scribes' heads as they bent over parchments, whispering, "Write it all." The same eyes that tracked Roman movements across dunes now watch from frescoes and stelae, saying without words, "Look what we did. Look what you tried to forget." And isn't that the sharpest irony? Rome, for all its roads and aqueducts and meticulous record-keeping, couldn't control how history would remember this chapter. The empire that gave us Veni, Vidi, Vici, met a woman who replied, "You came. You saw, you limped home." So here we are, 2,000 years later, piecing together fragments from temple walls and biased Roman accounts, trying to hear her voice beneath the noise. Maybe that's the real victory. Not just that Kush survived, but that Amanirenas refused to let her story die politely. She weaponized memory itself. Now the candles burn low, and the weight of the story settles onto your shoulders like a cloak. You're left with one question humming in the silence. Who gets to decide what history remembers? The scribes? The victors? The merchants who carried tales along desert trade routes? Or perhaps, just perhaps, the ones who listen now, who turn these echoes back into voices every time they repeat them? So tell me, as the stars wheel over Meroe's ghostly outlines, if you could ensure one forgotten story survived for centuries, whose would it be? The sand waits for your answer.